Everybody set? No? Okay. Yeah, go ahead. You good? Okay. We'll get started. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Before we get too far, I want to introduce Eric Larson, Kenosha Police Department Chief. And to my right is Dan Tilton, our Deputy Chief of the Fire Department, and our Inspector Keith Alds, who's also our investigator. You should by now have received a press release. Just to go over some of the facts that are in there. At 21:30 hours or 9:30 yesterday, structure fire was reported at 1870 22nd Avenue. First units arrived at 21:35, smoke and flames showing on arrival. In total, 13 units, 33 personnel from the department worked on the scene. Bristol Fire Department and Pleasant Prairie Fire Department also were called to backfill our fire stations during the firefighting operations. Fire control was achieved at 2200, or roughly a half hour after arrival. At 22:15, flames were extinguished, and a secondary search has continued after extinguishment. The fire had two fire deaths, or two fire-related deaths. One found immediately in the southwest apartment on the first floor, the apartment of origin. The second one was a patient that had been transported to the hospital and later died at the hospital. There was an additional person found dead in the building, the northwest second floor, and it appears at this point that that was a medical and not fire-related death, but the ME will need to confirm. In addition, 5 individuals were transported to the hospital. I should clarify that one of those was one of the people that passed. We also had a police officer that was taken and treated and released for smoke inhalation. The fire was contained in the southwest corner of the structure. It was a good fire stop, and efforts by KPD and KFD saved lives. I'm very proud of that fact and thankful for all of their help. At this point, I'd be open to any questions.
Chief, how do you know the medical-related death? I guess what indicates that to you?
The indications were that he was possibly dead before our arrival, and that's as far as I can go with that right now. Emmy will be able to confirm that.
How big is this place? How many residents?
Keith, do you know that?
16 units.
There are 16 units in the apartment building.
It's all seniors?
Yes.
Chief, are you able to tell us the cause or the origin of this fire and
Right.
damage estimates at this point?
Right now it's under investigation. I actually brought Keith off scene to come here and be with us today. He'll continue to work on it, and once we have a report, we'll release that information.
Do you know the names of the deceased yet?
I do not.
Those?
I do not. We can't release them right now.
Will you confirm their ages and genders?
I cannot do that either. Sorry.
Have you accounted for everybody?
Everyone's been accounted for. There's one person that is missing. When I say that, they're not in the building. We've accounted that there's no one left in the building. But as to where they are, unless there's any further information.
You said 16 units. Does that mean 16 residents?
16 units. There may be more than one resident per unit.
But you know that everyone's accounted for. So what's that total number?
You know those numbers?
As far as, I'm sorry, what was the question?
Total occupants?
I don't know that.
So the way we determined that somebody was missing was the manager is saying they couldn't get a hold of 2 people. We found one of them, and we're still trying to locate the other.
Chief, what did you referenced in the press release a police officer, maybe others, were going into the building before you were able to get there. Can you describe what the officer did to get people out?
Yes, I'll let you speak to that.
Sir, if you could say your name, please, as well, and spell it for us.
Yeah, it's Eric Larson, Larsen. So the initial responding officers found, obviously saw the active fire. They opened the door to the lower part of the unit. It has common hallways. And as they're doing so, there were people that were on their knees and trying to get through it was described as being a smoke-filled hallway. And this officer was escorting these people out while the other officers held the door. Subsequently responding officers, there is a second floor to this building. And I imagine that's where much of the flame and smoke activity was. And they used their flashlights to then mark essentially where other residents were they're at the windows, so that responding fire engines could put their ladders up and evacuate those individuals.
Tell us about the smoke that the police officers encountered. I mean, did it completely go right down to the ground? You said people were on the ground.
Yeah, so it was described to me as being very heavy, but I believe it was lighter towards the ground as the smoke, the density of the smoke tends to be higher rather than low, just like they teach you when you're in school, to crawl through a fire. So it was described as very dense. The initial officer who went through the door probably consumed the brunt of it, and he was transported to, I believe it was Freighter, for local hospital for the smoke inhalation by officers as the med units were tied up.
Where are the displaced residents?
The displaced residents were placed by the Red Cross, and I can't tell you exactly where they placed anyone.
Chief, how's the officer doing now?
He's doing fine. Yeah, he'll recover. He's off today, and I'm sure he'll return in the next couple days.
But not in the hospital.
He was not hospitalized. He's treated and released.
Could you kind of characterize what he did? I mean, what the officers do? I mean, obviously a fire, you may or may not go in. You're supposed to kind of assess it, right? Can you talk about why he decided to go in?
Well, they're told not to go in, but I don't know an officer that wouldn't go in. And I guess the assessment is going to be essentially what they're seeing, what they're observing, what they're sensing, the heat, the flames, the smoke. I think that there's probably a point to that an individual can tolerate going in without any specialized equipment. And at that point, I guess it was just the smoke that he was observing, the heavy smoke.
Were there working smoke detectors, any sprinklers that went off, and were you alerted by someone calling 911 or?
That I'm not aware of how the initial alarm came through, and maybe you can speak to that.
According to the inspector, there were working smoke detectors. That building is not sprinklered.
Did you talk about the 911 call too?
I'm
Did
sorry.
you talk about a 911 call? Was there a 911 call made?
I would imagine there was, but I have not heard that.
Okay, so you're not sure like how it was discovered, who discovered it?
No, they're still working on that in the investigation too.
Sir, how would you describe these apartments in terms of how they're constructed, what kind of danger they might represent in terms of fire? Are they more? Are they less? Materials? I mean, I've been to so many fires, I kind of know the smell of these things, and sort of particularly
Well, Keith,
speaks to some.
my inspector's been there all day, so I'll let him speak to the construction real quick and give you more of a description of the building itself.
And again, sir, if you could just say your full name, spell it, and your title.
Keith Alds, Keith Aulds, Inspector, City of Kenosha Fire Department. I believe the buildings were built early 70s. This building that was on fire. Standard construction. It is full dimensional lumber. And it seems like all of the units seem to be, all the units that we went into were single bedroom units with one bathroom and a standard living room and a small kitchen.
Materials though and stuff. Did it seem any more flammable or less, just given the age of it? It's 50 years old.
No, typically when you have a building that old, it's actually built with more dimensional lumber, where it's standard drywall and regular. It's not pre-engineered trusses or anything like that.
So that makes it safer?
It does make it safer, typically, yes, sir.
The news release said that there was a high level of toxic fumes. Should we be reading anything into that? Is that the normal thing that you would encounter?
I did not notice anything on scene that would indicate anything more toxic than any other structure fire.
And what about the sprinkling? What does city ordinance state right now? If apartments like that would be built?
If they were built today, they would require sprinklers per state statute. When the building was built, it was built to the code of the day, which does not require sprinklers for units like that. It did have a alarm system that was a local system, locally monitored, and it was tested as well.
And presumably to retrofit a building with that age with sprinklers would not be feasible? Or
That's up to the management company.
so it's possible?
Everything's possible.
Inspector, I know we really can't talk too much about what the conditions were when you found these people who had passed because of the fire. But from talking to a lot of the people who were neighbors and so on, they knew these were much older folks who were very immobile. What can we say to other people who are living in those kinds of circumstances and their relatives who worry about their older moms and dads who are living in these circumstances? A fire happens, rooms like those go up, really fast. We've seen those demonstrations.
Sure.
And these people are not mobile, even with the best alarms and 911 calls and the best fire.
Well, one of the most important things that people can do is, if they are unable to exit the building, is to keep their front door closed. It will keep the fire at bay as best, for a longer length of time, to allow for firefighters to come in and rescue them.
But what if the fire's in their place, which apparently was the case here?
Sure. Then, if they're immobile, I mean, they're at their mercy. Just make sure that that there's not a lot of clutter and stuff to trip on, that the people have a easier way to get out.
I think you indicated one fire fatality was found in the southwest first floor room. Was that room occupied by anybody other than the person who died there?
Not to my knowledge, no.
And what can you tell us about the victims, the deceased?
Right now, there'd be nothing to release on the victims. We don't have any further information.
And what about the injured?
But there again, too, they were transported to a local hospital. I can't give you any more information or updates, at least right now.
Chief, can you just speak to, this is the second big fire so far this year in the city after the Model Market fire just 2 weeks ago. Can you just speak to how that is kind of taxing resources, taxing investigators as you continue to look into that fire and now this one as well?
I think this time of year is always taxing to any fire department, especially in the Midwest like we are. It's cold. Weather definitely played a hand in the Model Market fire. In this fire, although it was warmer, it still wasn't comfortable. And in this one, we had more people involved. So.
Chief, speaking of the Model Market fire, do you have any updates on the identification of...
We don't have any more updates. They'll be forthcoming from the ME.
Chief, what have you learned from this incident last night, if anything?
What have I learned?
In terms of firefighting, in terms of dealing with older folks who can be so quickly victimized?
Just to continue to be diligent, continue to do the job that we're doing, leaning on PD also with their assistance, and encouraging people to make sure they check the batteries in their smoke detectors and the simple things that you're taught even at a very early age. But at this point, that's everything we have for information. And so again, I thank you guys for all coming. Updates will be sent out as we get them, and identifications will be made by the ME.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.